Alright, hello and welcome to another Versus video. So, today we're going to be going over some misconceptions between Nezha and Rhino. Because there are a lot of things that I've seen that somehow people think that, like, Nezha is somehow tougher than Rhino and stuff. And, like, they don't really know what the advantages to being Nezha are. And there are a few. So that's what this video is for, because there's a stark difference between Rhino and Nezha, even though their powers are incredibly similar. So let's just go over some powers real quick. So in terms of abilities, Firewalker gives you a speed boost, you leave flame in your path. This also cures statuses on your allies, which is fine. It's pretty okay in certain scenarios. Blazing Chakram, this is a teleport. Combine it with Firewalker. If your Firewalker is on and you throw this, you do burst. That does roughly, I think it's 1100, 1200 damage, which is okay. Definitely really good in the early game. And this is also a way for you to heal, but you shouldn't really need to be healing very much because you've got Warding Halo. So Warding Halo is an okay ability. This is one of the points of like contention between Nezha and Rhino, in that Warding Halo is fine. It's not better than Iron Skin. Just raw, it's just not better than Iron Skin. But we'll get into that more after we've gone over Rhino's abilities. And then Divine Spears. So this is an Impale. You have a cast time where you impale enemies, and then you have another cast time where you slam enemies. The second one you are forced into unless you did not impale any enemies, in which case, that's unfortunate for you. And this does okay damage, and the crowd control is completely negated by Ancients, which are in the most dangerous enemy group, Corrupted, but is rather effective on Corpus and just base Grineer. So, that's Nezha's powers. Then we have Rhino. Rhino's powers, Rhino Charge. So this is a hard knockdown that has comboing and has an augment with it that is incredibly good and is a charge that can take you across the map. You're also health immune during this, so you can't be killed while you're doing it. Pretty good one. Actually really strong, used correctly, especially with its augment. Iron Skin. So Iron Skin is... Okay, so Iron Skin, this is the difference between Iron Skin and Nezha's Warding Halo. Iron Skin has 400 more health. Just straight up, like just regular. It costs 25 less energy. It has an augment where you can refresh it, which is huge. And on top of that, Rhino has more innate armor, so the scaling from this is always going to be better whenever you use things like Steel Fiber. So Iron Skin, even though Warding Halo has a little bit of crowd control on it that is negligible, Iron Skin is still going to beat it like pretty much every time in terms of being a defensive ability. Because of your augments being able to make Iron Skin way stronger than Nezha's Warding Halo could like even realistically hope to be, unless they're doing the same thing with their time invulnerable windows. Along with that, Iron Skin has a like way faster casting time than Warding Halo, although they're pretty similar. Then we've got Roar. So this is a team buff. You can buff the entire team. You get almost a 2 damage multiplier at my power strength, which I'm using Transient Fortitude, I believe, and you get pretty much double damage at all times. Power duration is pretty respectable, starts at 30 seconds. I've got mine buffed up just a little bit, and you can give this buff to teammates, which is really powerful, definitely more powerful than being able to cleanse allies in most scenarios. And then finally, we've got Rhino Stomp. So, Rhino Stomp does 400 less damage, albeit it does 800 instantly, as opposed to Nezha doing 600 at the beginning and then 600 at the end. So there's that little weirdness there that doesn't make a whole lot of difference. Nezha ends up doing more damage with her ult, his ult rather. The duration on Rhino Stomp for its crowd control is 4 seconds shorter, but it works on all non-boss enemies as opposed to being negated by any form of crowd control reduction that enemies have, unless they are a boss type enemy, of course. It's also 6 meters larger in radius, and on top of that, you can recast this at any time, and it doesn't have to be cast twice, and it casts faster. So Rhino Stomp, in terms of crowd controlling enemies, is pretty much just raw better than Divine Spears. Those are some of the differences there. Now, let's go over the advantages that Nezha has And to show that, we'll just switch to Nezha. So the thing about Nezha, and it's the big difference between Nezha and Rhino, is that Nezha's really fast, and it's because of Nezha's passive. So Nezha's passive makes it so that he's better at sliding just all over. So the kind of mod of choice for moving around, at least for me, I'm sure other people don't use this mod, is Maglev. So Maglev makes it so you can go really, really fast without needing to bullet jump. And that's just this is just Maglev plus his passive. It makes it so that you can butt scoots super, super fast around the map. And this is kind of the big advantage that Nezha has over Rhino, is that, and over a lot of the Warframes, is being able to be pretty quick. So, if you value this, obviously this is going to be better on Nezha. Nezha will beat Rhino in a race every single time. That's not a question. Nezha will definitely beat Rhino in a race. That's for sure. But let's go over. Well, let's do Nezha's test right now. So level 80 enemies, pretty regular, and we'll show Divine Spears, how Ancients totally negate that, and the kind of disadvantages and advantages that Nezha has, and the weirdness with his 2, and all sorts of other things like that. So 4, obviously, it doesn't work because all these enemies are being affected. Or not these ones over here, obviously. You can see the difference. The Ancients and the enemies that were next to the Ancients, it's not affecting them. Because Ancients are so prevalent and really important, because they're everywhere, it's very important to get rid of them very early. But along with that, it does make things a lot more difficult for you. That, coupled with Nezha not having like incredible range, means that his 4 is just okay. It takes too much like time away from you, I find, because of its double cast time, which is completely unnecessary. And because you can't buff up your 3 or refresh your 3, you're vulnerable a lot. Also, you can't headshot enemies whenever they're on these pikes. You can ground finisher them, but ground finishers aren't even particularly that useful. And because you're going to need to be recasting, and you would want to cast like all the time, you don't really have a lot of energy sustainability. Unless, of course, you take, let's say, like the Synoid Gammacore or the Synoid Simulor, which resolves a lot of that problem, or if you're using Xeneric. But those are kind of niche extra cases that kind of give any frame unlimited energy. But yeah, that's Nezha. Nezha has problems with, like, engaging in fights, basically. Because you can show up, but, like, there are certain enemies that kind of just shut you down, that you're suddenly reduced to, like, just sliding and having your guns, which is fine. And, I mean, I guess if you wanted to argue, like, a skill aspect or whatever, I guess that's whatever, but I don't like being reduced to just my guns on the whim of one enemy being around. Also, like, the disadvantages of casting twice are huge. Let's roll over to Rhino. I think I have the same exact weapon set up on Rhino, if I'm not mistaken. I think I might have my melee weapon actually be different. It's the Katag instead. Otherwise, everything is the same. And then, you saw my build on Nezha earlier. This is what I'm using on Rhino. Just let's drop him down because I've put I put Forma in him. Let's drop him down and intensify. Pop that out. And I think this is roughly what I would be at with no Forma, I think. Yeah, 14 extra points. This is roughly what I would be at with no Forma. Yeah. So now let's do Rhino. So Rhino's 4 affects all enemies. All non-boss enemies. You can also use Iron Shrapnel to do damage and do crowd control, which is the augment that I'm using. And then feed that into your 2, which gives me a really strong Iron Skin. Obviously using my buff. Gives me jaw-dropping damage. The super fast cast times of his 2. And his like innately stronger iron skin lets him walk at enemies at a much higher level. But of course, you are slower. The reason I have Firewalker in my Rhino is to like just change that basically, because like this is Rhino. Okay, so we'll just do some like how fast you're going. So like this is bullet jumping with Rhino. This is how you get around with Rhino because this is the fastest way to do it with Rhino regularly, and that's the reason I add Firewalker to him. Also keep in mind, like with Forma, obviously both frames are going to be stronger. That's why I just reduced how powerful I was, because it's obviously not fair to compare 3 Forma frame to a no Forma frame whenever you're not like dropping some mods, even though Firewalker doesn't really do a whole lot for me. But yeah, this is how fast Rhino is when you're using Firewalker. This mod will make pretty much any Warframe fast, which is one of the reasons why speed is not really a huge factor in terms of how good a Warframe is, because there's not a lot of things that are time sensitive on us being very, very quick, and that's more personal preference how fast you'd like to be. But yeah, the big thing is, the huge thing that separates Nezha and Rhino is honestly Rhino's augments, because it makes him really defensive. Like, besides Rhino innately being way harder to kill and having a like better buff, like Nezha can cleanse, but this buff is at like this gives you a huge damage boost. Like, having that much more damage is great. It's great in melee, it's great for guns, you can give it to teammates, and it's always appreciated. Having a 4 that can't be stopped by like a very common enemy type, the Ancients, is awesome. Having hard knockdown on your 1, having the defensive abilities, all that stuff makes Rhino like way more defensive. But the thing that Nezha does have is speed. No one can ever argue that. That is not even a normal argument to be made, and you can play as both these frames. I actually so kind of the lead up, this is actually another thing, this is a good thing to end on, I suppose. So whenever I did my Warframe like reviews, I gave Nezha a C-. Nezha had just come out like very recently, and I was really disappointed with Nezha because I think Nezha should be better. I think Nezha needs some buffs, and I think that Nezha coming from Swordies is kind of ridiculous, even though Nezha is very cheap now. If you wanted to buy it for Platinum, it would take you not very long to get a Nezha. But in testing for this video and kind of like going over some more builds and stuff, I took Nezha from a C- to a B-, because he's not niche, he's just, he needs tweaking. He needs to be a little better, and that's what my B rank is generally for, is for frames that need to be a little bit better than they are. So yeah, for those of you that were unhappy with my Nezha grade, Nezha is a B- frame now as opposed to a C-. C- was being very harsh on Nezha, honestly. Because there are some advantages, definitely over other frames of playing Nezha. Like Nezha and Equinox, I would prefer to play Nezha almost all of the time. But yeah, that's Rhino and Nezha. There's a lot of differences, but they're very, very similar. I think Rhino's kit is a lot more cohesive and better, and I don't think that like Firewalker plus this 2 is like, this is not like a very good combo, and I think the 2 is awkward to use, even though it is super fun. But there are advantages to playing Nezha. The speed is important. But yeah, that's Rhino versus Nezha, and I hope this helped you guys out. Later.